Hey everybody. Well, I had some problems with my computer, but it looks like it's working now. So I apologize. I hope you will find me here. So today's an important day because I have some wonderful reports from previous settings. We're starting this piece called "Viral Acts of Sanity" and "Viral Acts of Kindness," we should say as well. And so what we're doing is asking you after each program to list in the comments some wonderful things that people are doing around you to support healing. And coronavirus does not take the weekend off, so we're not taking the weekend off either. I've extended my broadcast to Saturday and Sunday as well as Monday through Friday. So sorry if you had some trouble finding me today, but I'm messing with my computer, so hopefully we're all getting together now. So I want to read you some amazing reports from folks who are writing in. If you want to write in where you're viewing from in the chat today, that's great. If you want to write it in the comments, that's great too. But listen to this. This is super inspiring to me. So this is from Inez in Portugal. And she says, "Greetings from Portugal. Our government has given migrants residence during the pandemic so they can have the same rights as the Portuguese people. I find it so wonderful. We are one and our government has embraced this truth. Imagine there are no countries, borders, religion. I'm so blessed." She says, "Migrants will now be free to use the country's health service, welfare system, bank accounts, and work and rental contracts." So in a time when we're tempted to separate and push people away and keep ourselves protected, some people are actually embracing all and seeing all as worthy of well-being and healing. How cool is that? And this comes from, I believe, Celise in South Africa. And she said, "In South Africa, our leaders are united as one. They all agree on the methods to curb the spread of the virus. They usually never agree on anything. We also had a nationwide prayer, including all the religions, all wanting the best for South Africa. Something we've never seen. This is what Nelson Mandela intended for South Africa to be. We could all just unite and love each other." How good is that? And an amazing one, I might read this from time to time, but this comes from D. Smith, wherever D. Smith is. And she said, this is a quote from an author named Kitty O'Meara. I just was blown away by this. And it says, "And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and grew gardens full of fresh food and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed." Now, that's an amazingly powerful quote. What's even more amazing is when it was written. It was written sometime between 1839 and 1888 by French Catholic author Kitty O'Meara. So isn't it amazing that something like this has happened before in its own way, and people found a way to heal? So, what I want to talk to you today about is about setting healthy emotional boundaries, especially at a time when there's a lot of negativity. And so, we've been taught to wash our hands frequently, which is probably a good idea. But what most people are not doing is washing their aura frequently. And so, we need to cleanse our aura of fear and negativity. Now, a lot of you who are watching this and who are on the spiritual path are fairly empathic, deep feelers, kind people who care, and you tend to take on the fears or negation or upsets or problems of others. Well, that's very nice because it fosters kindness. However, after a certain point, it really backs up on you. So let me give you some examples of how not to do it, and then we can raise our consciousness to how to do it. So many years ago, I had a buddy named Jeff who had just gotten engaged, and he was very excited about his engagement. And one day I was giving him a ride somewhere, and he didn't say much, but by the end of the ride, I felt depressed. And I had no idea why I felt depressed because I was feeling fabulous at the beginning of our ride. And the next day, he told me that his engagement had been broken. And so this guy was just kind of like in a pool of upset. And unknowingly, I took it on and I became upset too. Now, this is what's happening on the planet now. There's a pool of thought around the planet that is a big dark cloud, basically formed by most people who are afraid and anxious and tense and upset. And we can understand why. We're not making that wrong. However, Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, talked about what he called race thought. This is not physical race or cultural race. It's the race of humanity. And what he said is that when people think a thought, now thoughts are things and their forces. Thoughts are things and their forces. So when you think a thought, it is rocketed into the atmosphere and it lingers. And especially if there's emotion behind the thought, you're actually sending an emotion out into the universe that invites people who are a match to that emotion to meet you there and expand it. This is what Ernest Holmes called race thought. Now, unfortunately, a lot of race thought is negative. And so if you vibe with it, the law of attraction says that which connects and joins on agreement tends to deepen and edify and expand. And so what's happening now is a lot of people are thinking negative thoughts. If you join them, you're going to be hit hard. And of course, the news and the media are one of the biggest outlets for dark thought because they capitalize on fear. So the news wants you to be afraid because you get to pay them by watching the show and watching the commercials. Now, many years ago, I was a guest on CNN. I was interviewed on CNN. And they took me on a tour of their facility, which was very nice. And in this long, thin hallway, they have a graph of their viewership. And it was so obvious that the highest viewership was when there were the biggest disasters. So the first one for CNN was the Challenger disaster in 1986 or thereabouts. And then came the Gulf War, and then came 9/11, then came Gulf War II, and on and on. So the news depends on you watching disasters to keep them in business. And of course, some news outlets are more reasonable and honest than others. We're not going to go into that now. But news depends on you joining them in the race thought of fear to keep them in business. And even more fundamentally than that, all people who are in fear, how shall I say this? Fear has an investment in maintaining itself. And it's very true that misery loves company because when somebody is upset, they want you to be upset with them to justify their ego's upset. And this is why misery truly does love company. And I saw a wonderful meme a while back. It says, misery has enough company. time to be happy. So what we want to be careful to do now is not to vibrate, co-match, law of attract, commingle with this pool of dark thought. And we want to commingle with the pool of light thought, which there is as well. And that's exactly why I'm doing this broadcast each day, why many people are doing global meditations. Many people are doing interfaith religion meditations, because there are people on the planet who have more of an investment in healing coronavirus and the economy than in contributing to the pool of thought that is sustaining it. You guys follow this? I think you do. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. My teacher, Hilda Charlton, was a great metaphysical teacher, and she explained that she never watched the news, read the news on the same day that it came out. Why? Because when there's a big scary story, millions or billions of people are focusing on that scary story, and they're adding their emotion to it. And if you go into it, you're sucked into like quicksand. She said that she used to read the newspaper a couple days later when there was not that much emotional attachment to the thoughts that were floating around in the atmosphere with everybody who had read that news story. Now, there was a psychological study, this is interesting, that was done that's kind of similar. And some psychologists took people who were crossword puzzle aficionados, and they tested their skill on a New York Times crossword puzzle for the day, and they got a certain rating. And then they tested their skill a few days later on a puzzle that had been published the previous day. So basically, they were seeing the puzzle after 1 or 2 days after it had been published. They did significantly higher, they scored significantly higher on the day or two old puzzle than they did on the new puzzle. And metaphysically speaking, how I understand this is that when a lot of people had already solved that puzzle, the answers were already floating around in group mind. Or I think Rupert Sheldrake calls this the morphogenic field, in which all thoughts are collected. Some people call it the Akashic record, where there's a pool of thought, and when you tap into that pool of thought, you have access to it. And so they did better on the puzzle that was old because other people had already done the puzzle. And this is like the 100th monkey phenomenon that you've heard about for many years. So what you want to be very careful to do is to tap into the field of thought that matches where you want to end up rather than what matches what you want to get away from. Now, this is a difference between empathy and sympathy. We teach this in my coach training course. So empathy is when you understand what somebody's going through. They're upset, you know what upset means. They're guilty, they feel guilty, they feel jealous, they feel afraid, and you know what it's like, and you can recognize an emotion and respect it and honor them and support them in whatever they're going through. Sympathy is when you tap into their emotional experience so much that it now becomes yours. So now there's two people in pain. And the analogy is you're walking down the street and somebody's fallen in a hole and you want to help them. So you jump in the hole, but unfortunately now you have two people who are in the hole. You both need help. The real thing to do, the most helpful thing to do, is to stay on solid ground and reach into the hole and pull them out, because when you're on solid ground, you now have leverage to help them. If you go in the hole, then there's a bunch of people in the hole together. So this, my friends, is exactly what is happening on the planet now. Many people are in fear, many people are in stress. Understandably, there's things that are challenging. It's a big challenge. However, the people who will be most helpful, people who are being most helpful, are those who are staying on solid ground. So your job today is to wash your hands frequently if you want to, but even more importantly, wash your aura frequently by doing whatever you need to do to get clear. Meditate, pray with your dogs, watch a cool video, relax, take a nap, do some creative writing, whatever your method is to cleanse your aura of fear And now you become empowered to help those who aren't free. You're on the top of it, you're on the ground, extending your hand into the hole, helping people out. That's what your job is. And I think Mahatma Gandhi said it so beautifully. He said, the pure love of one person can offset the hatred of millions. And we can paraphrase that by saying that the pure peace and the pure confidence and the pure trust and connection to spirit of one person can offset the fear of billions. That's what we're going through now, and this is our job. Well, thank you for listening today. I'm sorry we had a little mix up with our setup, but I'll do my best to make sure it doesn't happen again. We're continuing our viral acts of kindness campaign. So if you're aware of something that somebody is doing in the midst of this quote crisis that is helping and being a light and supporting people, please post it on the comment, and I will share one or two each day as we continue to meet every day, including weekends, through the month of April. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. This is exciting to me, and you are all holding the light, and we will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Love you. Aloha.